Recognized.
Madam Speaker, thank you. I thank the gentleman for yielding me this time, and I rise in support of this resolution. There is nothing conservative about the war in Afghanistan. In fact, it goes against every traditional conservative position I've ever known. It has meant massive foreign aid, which we cannot afford, and of which conservatives have traditionally been the biggest critics. It's meant huge deficit spending shortly after the Congress has at a time the Congress has raised our national debt to over $14 trillion. Conservatives have traditionally been against huge deficit spending. Conservatives have been the biggest critics of the UN and biggest opponents to world government. And certainly the war in Afghanistan has gone right along with that. Fiscal conservatives should be the most horrified about the hundreds of billions that has been spent over there. This war has gone on for more than 8 years, at a time when the war in Iraq had gone on for a far shorter time than that. William F. Buckley, who opposed the war in Iraq, wrote this about that war. He said, "A respect for the power of the United States is engendered by our success in engagements in which we take part. A point is reached when tenacity conveys not steadfastness of purpose, but misapplication of pride." And he went on to say that if this war drags on, talking about the war in Iraq, he said, "Where there had been skepticism about our venture, there will be contempt." And all those words apply equally well to the war in Afghanistan. There is nothing conservative about the war in Afghanistan. Georgianne Geyer, the conservative foreign affairs columnist, she wrote this also once again about the war in Iraq, but it applies to this war as well. She said, "Critics of the war have said since the beginning of the conflict that Americans, still strangely complacent about overseas wars being waged by minorities in their name, will inevitably come to a point where they will see they have to have a government that provides services at home or one that seeks empire across the globe." And we should remember, Madam Speaker, that even General Petraeus said we should never forget that Afghanistan has been known as the graveyard of empires. Our Constitution does not give us the power or the right to run another country, and that's what we've been doing. It should have come as no surprise, Madam Speaker, that President Karzai of Afghanistan told ABC News recently that the U.S. needs to stay there for 15 to 20 years more, spending mega billions, of course. He wants our money, and he wants to stay in power. But listen to what columnist George Will has said. He's now changed his position and has written about Afghanistan that the budget will not support an expansion there. The military, quote, "will be hard-pressed to execute it, and America's patience will not be commensurate with Afghanistan's limitless demands. This will not end well." Those were not my words. Those are the words of George Will. A very small but very powerful group called neoconservatives, who are really not conservative at all, have almost totally controlled U.S. foreign policy for many years. They are supported by very large companies and government officials who benefit from perpetual war and the billions of spending it requires. George Will wrote in that same column, he said that neoconservatives are, quote, "magnificently misnamed," and that they are really, quote, "the most radical people in this town." The Pentagon now says it costs $1 billion per year for each 1,000 troops that we spend there. We can't afford this, Madam Speaker. We can't afford to keep spending hundreds of billions in Afghanistan. We're not cutting and running. We've been there over 8 years now. If this resolution passes, we'll be there 9 years. That is too long. It's not only enough, it's far too long. It's time to do the best thing we can do for our troops and bring our young men and women home and start putting Americans first once again. Thank you very much.
Gentleman's time has expired. Who seeks recognition?